All right, so today I want to talk about some of my most recent experiences with timeline switches, right? So timeline switches right now, they're being talked about quite a bit. And I think a big part of that is because CERN just shut down, which my understanding is that CERN was affecting the timelines. It was stabilizing certain timelines, most likely lower frequency timelines, considering who was in charge of CERN. And so because it's not stabilizing those timelines anymore, people have been noticing a lot of things with time. Like I've heard a lot of people say that like time is slowing down. There's been a lot of timeline glitches, and things like that. So I experienced one of these. So I'm going to be telling that story today. And then I'm gonna be talking about two other times that I like noticeably kind of switched timelines. And it's interesting because I think with all three of these, I want to talk about not just the physical like aspect of it, what happened in the third dimension, but like also the metaphysical like healing soul evolution part of it because a lot of times when we're switching timelines, it's because of the choices that we're making and because we're going into a higher timeline, because we're healing ourselves, we're making different choices, we are processing emotions, we're forgiving, we're letting go. We are basically clearing our attachment to certain things in our life, and that is allowing us to get onto higher timelines. So yes, like CERN, being shut down, not controlling the timelines anymore, like that is a part of this most recent story. I'm going to tell anyway, the other two not so much, but I just want to talk about that too because there's just a lot of talk about switching timelines online, and I don't think that kind of like spiritual or healing aspect always comes in. So, with that being said, let's get into it. So it is currently July of 2026, and a few days ago, I think like 5 or 6 days ago, I had an incident where I walked into my bathroom. So I've recently moved into a new place at the beginning of the month. It took me a long time to settle in because I actually moved in with an injury. And so I just couldn't, unload and get everything set up like, as quickly as I normally do. Kind of doing it in stages. And so this morning that I noticed this timeline switch. I walked into my bathroom and I saw two of something that I only bought one of. So I found two antibiotic ointments on my counter when I only could remember buying one. And I'm going to be honest, my first reaction was like, I have a timeline glitch. It's finally happened for me. All these other people online, I've seen them having like these stories. I've heard these stories about timeline glitches, and it's finally happened to me. So I was like super, super excited, which sounds really like nerdy and dorky and all that. But I was super excited, so I was like, I'm gonna film this video and I'm gonna put it on my Instagram. And so I actually am gonna play y'all this video right now. So I just had my first ever like glitch in the Matrix that I can actually like hardcore like prove. So I'm excited to share it. Um, I went, was it like 2 or 3 days ago, and I bought this from Target because I knew I was out of this. I knew I needed to buy something, and I just bought one. And then when I got home, I brought it upstairs. I put it on my bathroom counter. I'm still moving into a new place, and so I haven't really put everything up yet. Well, this morning I came into my bathroom and I found two of them. And I didn't buy two of them, but I have two, even though I only bought one. And I know that, it's proof to me because I know I only bought one. Now I have two. It's a glitch in the matrix, based on my own perception. And last night, I was doing a lot of work around my anxiety, healing some of my anxieties and my fears. And it did kind of feel like a part of me was like healing, moving, jumping to the next timeline. I'm trying to find the right words because it did feel like kind of like a transformation. Like a part of me is like dying and then like a new part of me was like being reborn, right? It felt like Phoenix rising from the ashes type of moment last night. And then I wake up and I see this. So I'm like, okay, like maybe the work I did last night was a timeline, caused a timeline jump, right? Like that work allowed me to jump into a new timeline. I glitched out. And so that's why I got these glitches. And it's interesting because when I was buying this, I was like, did I already buy this? Like, did I buy one? Do I have an extra one? But I think I was more thinking to like a few months ago, like 3 or 4 months ago. And so I was like, I don't know, but there was this weird feeling. So I think it was kind of sensing there was going to be a glitch. Look at the expiration dates on these. They're both 2028 1006. So the same batch. They're not from when I bought them before. Let's see if I can show you guys. I don't know if you can see that. But yeah, I finally have a physical like timeline glitch story that like, wow, I've been waiting for this. I have been waiting for this. Okay, so that is my original video, and I want to show you guys, here are the two antibiotic ointments. Now, one of them, I did get the antibiotic, because they have two of them. So one of them I did get them out. I started using it. But after I posted that video, I was like, okay, I want to make sure just like that I didn't, like accidentally buy this and like forgot I buy it or something like that, right? Because I feel like our human brains always try to like logic like through like what could have actually happened. Is this really real? Because it's like this stuff is exciting, but there's also that part of it that's just been like so conditioned to be in the third dimensional, physical world that, we do kind of second guess ourselves. So if you'll notice, this brand is I think it's called Up and Up brand. Obviously, yeah, there we go. So that brand is only sold at Target. So this is Target's only brand. Couldn't have gone to Walmart, couldn't have gone to CVS, couldn't have gone anywhere and bought this brand, right? And so I went through my Target app because every time I go to Target, I always put in my phone number to get points, to get discounts, right? And it logs all of my in-store purchases as well as all of my online purchases, which I don't really get a lot of stuff online from Target. Normally I live in places where there's multiple Targets. So if I really want something, I can just drive to another Target, right? Um, but it has the whole purchase history in there. So I went through my entire purchase history and I'm going to put the screenshot showing that I only bought a quantity of one of these. You'll see it's a picture of this box and it has one. So I'm going to put that up on the screen. But I went through my entire purchase history all the way back to February. The last time I remember buying this ointment because I remember I had like my eye was like puffy and I like got it out. I used it on my eye. And then I actually use it a lot on my earrings because my ears can kind of get irritated by different earrings. So like that was the last time I bought it. I've been using that on like my earrings. And then the other one, I actually confirmed like a few days later. I found this in my stuff I was unpacking from the one I bought in February because these are 2 packs. I still have that one like in my like supplies. And so I went through and I confirmed like this is a glitch in the matrix. Like this is something I can actually like prove out. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be putting up my whole purchase history for you guys to like audit me, but I'm saying in terms of like me personally going through my purchase history, right, and looking as like, okay, like I know 100% like this is a glitch in the matrix. I bought one and I have two. So, um, I want to, and I think this, and it's interesting too, because I think I've heard other accounts of like in the same time period, like other people going online and saying they're having two of things they just bought. So that might be something that's like collectively happening to a bunch of people right now. I think because CERN was shut down. Now, there's also another aspect to this that I want to talk about because like I mentioned, this happened at a time where I was moving into a new apartment. I was also injured. So I had gone on a hike, injured myself, right? And so sometimes with an injury, your blood pressure can spike, is my, understanding based on the very limited medical knowledge that I have. And so I was having like high blood pressure. I also wasn't feeling well because of this injury because I was injured and I'm having to move a bunch of boxes. I moved to a place I don't know anyone, so don't have anyone to come help me move the boxes. So I'm on my leg quite a bit when I shouldn't be taking Advil, which raises your blood pressure as well. So I was having this high blood pressure, and I started having realizations because I was looking into the causes of high blood pressure. And I really realized that like my diet was like crazy high in salt because I think my whole life I've been so focused on being thin, or in my case, trying to be thin because I have not been thin the majority of my life. Just because of my life circumstances and like my genetics and just the trauma and healing that were making me compulsively overeat. I've always been, kind of society told us, especially like I'm a millennial, like in the 90s and 2000s, like it's just really important to be thin, and that's what your value is about, right? So, I always just look at the calorie count and nothing else. I'm like, not, it really made me realize how I'm just not, I haven't been concerned with my overall health. I've been like, whatever it takes to be thin, right? Which is interesting because I've never taken a GLP-1 or any kind of drug because I've always felt like that's a huge no. Like I'm not putting that stuff in my body for me. Like that's been my personal choice. But I was realizing that if you're only looking at the calorie and you're not thinking about salt, I was way too much salt. Oh my God. Like I was putting like sea salt on all my food because like sea salt is healthier than regular salt. And I mean, I think it is, but it's still like a high salt content. And I was drinking all these electrolytes that were like healthy brands that all the channelers and health and wellness people I trust, were talking about. I was like, holy shit, like if I keep like eating this much like salt, like, and also protein. Like I'm super into eating like mainly chicken, sometimes pork, but very rarely beef. But like I was buying these like prepackaged like chickens from the chicken nuggets and stuff like that from the grocery store that are super high in salt. And I was like, oh my God, like if I keep eating like this, like it could give me like heart disease or, like holy shit. Like I just, I was so focused on like trying to be thin and I mean, it wasn't really working. It did when I was younger, then after a while, it's just like your body pushes back. Um, and so I was like really having like this high blood pressure. And I started feeling like a lot of chest pain and like pain in my arm, which I think most of us associate with like the symptoms of a heart attack. Now, I don't actually know those are the symptoms of a heart attack in women. I think potentially more so men, at least with the arm pain. Chest pain, I think, would probably be for everyone. But in my mind, those are the symptoms of a heart attack, right? And so I was starting to like panic. I was like, oh my gosh, like what if I like, pass away from this? And I went and I was, lying in my bed, right? And first I had the realization about how I was really valuing being thin or trying to be thin over taking care of my body and taking care of my health and valuing my body and my health, less than like I'll do whatever it takes to be thin type of mentality, right? So first I was processing that and I was feeling like grief and not loving myself and taking better care of my body and not loving my body more. But then as I laid there and I felt these symptoms of what could potentially be high blood pressure and a heart attack, I really sat there and I sat in the anxiety of like, what if I did pass away tonight? What if this was my last, night just lying here? And I just sat in it and I let whatever emotions come up, grief, anger, thinking about what would actually happen. I wouldn't be able to continue doing this work or any type of work, right? I wouldn't be able to continue my life purpose or my mission on the planet, right? I wouldn't be able to continue doing any of the fun things that I loved, right? And I kind of envisioned myself what would happen about how I would leave my body and I would go and I would watch over my family. And it's interesting because I was doing this and spirit form, just imagining this happening as if it was real. And I was doing this for some time, and then my parents crossed over, right? They crossed over before my siblings did, obviously. That's if that happens, that's a good thing, right? Because no parent wants their kid to pass before they do. And so then my parents were with me, and we watched my siblings continue on in their lives together. And then we watched my nieces and nephews grow up together. And we watched them with so much love from the other side, even though, I couldn't be in there in the physical. I was there on the other side, still showing my family, love. And then I watched. So right now, I don't have a partner. I'm single. I want to find a partner, but I don't have one right now. And so I watched my partner from the other side in this, figurative, hypothetical type of exercise I was doing here, meet someone else and get married to someone else. Because in this like timeline or this version, right, like I wasn't making it past that night. And I found, peace at watching that person get married to someone else. And then I also saw my spirit baby was up there with me, not being born, right? So spirit baby, if you guys don't know, it's like an incoming soul who plans to come and like be your child, right? So called a spirit baby because they're, they want to be born as a baby, but they're in spirit, right? So right now I don't have any children either, at least in this timeline. Um, And so I gave them so much love on the other side of the spirit side, but I was like, you can go and you can be born now as a human and go and be with your dad. And I watched them go and be born, with my partner who, had married someone else. And I watched them go and have this physical life without me. And I did this all completely at peace that maybe I would never have those things this lifetime. I wouldn't get to continue my life and have that family or do mission work or do anything, right? Or be with my family now. And I just sat there and I allowed myself to have that peace, that the complete non-attachment to the continuation of this lifetime as myself, as Judith Hope. And um, I think in my brain, I've done so much of this type of work that I kind of was like, hey, like, it's unlikely. I felt like this was more of a like conceptual healing thing as opposed to like, oh my God, I might actually pass away. But there was that part of me, that anxiety that was like, but I am having these symptoms and I do feel unwell, So there's kind of both aspects in there. There's the scared part of me, and then there's the logical, part of me too. Um, so I did that whole exercise. I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning. I was feeling much better. And that's when I went into the bathroom and I found those two ointments, right? And so I think when we do a lot of that type of healing work, um, we do skip into different timelines, right? Because we can look at this metaphorically or we can look at this literally. And the metaphorical way is that this was a part of me dying, a piece of me, an energetic piece of me, an old part of me that I was ready to let go of, right? And that I was working on non-attachment. We could also look at this like literally there are two physical versions of me that split, and there is a timeline where I did pass away. And, that timeline, I'm no longer living on that timeline, right? And I think that I believe that both of these things are happening, right? Part of this is just my experience of healing and shedding different parts of myself. Part of this experience is I am anchoring myself to the highest timeline, right? Knowing that like I will keep going on the highest timeline until my soul pulls the plug and is ready to do something else, right? Um, and it's interesting because often I find that when I switch timelines, like I'm doing a lot of this type of work, and you'll hear more about this in another story I'm going to tell as well. Now, I want to note, because I think it's important when we're talking about metaphysical stuff like this, that the next day I still went to the doctor and told them about the pain I was having. I told them about my blood pressure readings. I got this machine. I was monitoring my blood pressure at home. I've been continuing to monitor my blood pressure as well. So even though to me, I think I categorize this as more of like, hey, like I think this was like my body having to experience the illness that I may have gotten later on in my 50s, 60s, 70s had I not changed my eating habits and my outlook about how I think about my body is related to overall health as opposed to what will make me the thinnest. Um, I look at that as like, hey, like this, I could have had these type of like truly had like high blood pressure and heart issues as, an older adult if I didn't fix these habits I have now and the way I'm eating now, right? Like that is those symptoms exiting the body. Like that's what I think is happening. But our current 3D physical science doesn't always support that idea. And I understand that. And I understand I'm living in a third dimensional physical world. And then I still need to go to our modern medical systems and I need to make sure that I'm actually talking to a doctor and just confirming that too, right? That like I don't need to seek medical attention or I do need to or whatever. So it's like I want to make sure that I'm grounding into that. Right? Because I think it's important to have that discussion when we're talking about the metaphysical. Like, it's okay to have these higher fifth dimensional experiences and know, like, I'm still living in a third dimensional world. I mean, we're shifting every day out of it, but until we're out of it, it's like, okay, I still got to go see the doctor. I still got to go talk to a doctor, right? And make sure that I'm okay. So I just wanted to mention that, like, always, like you don't have to just you can be in the third and fifth dimensions at the same time, right? You can go see the doctor, but also know like, hey, I'm also having this like spiritual or metaphysical experience too, right? Which is what I would always encourage you guys to do. So, with that being said, that is the first time I had physical evidence of a switch, a timeline glitch switch. But that is kind of my first story. I'm just looking at my notes, seeing if there's anything else. No, okay. So I have a couple more timeline switch stories. The next one I'm going to tell happened to me about 2 years ago now. So it happened in the fall of 2024. And so I'm just getting some water. And this story, it's pretty common. It was like a near miss car accident. And you hear a lot of these stories online. So you may have heard something similar, but I just want to talk about my story a little bit here. So in 2024, I had just kind of started my journey as a digital nomad, which I'm kind of in the process of actually wrapping up now. I plan to head back to Texas and be a little bit more stable for at least a year. But in 2024, I was leaving Texas and I was doing a big trip up to, I was going to Philadelphia and Boston. So I was driving from Northeast Texas through Tennessee, so through multiple states, but this story happened in Tennessee. And I almost got into a really bad car accident. And what is weird is that prior to leaving, my mom had been worried that I was going to get into a car accident. Like, I mean, really upset and like, oh my gosh, something's going to happen to you. And then she kind of had a premonition about it, right? So I had stopped at Buc-ee's in Tennessee. So I mentioned I'm from Texas. So if you know, you know Buc-ee's. I love Buc-ee's. And I had stopped there. I don't remember. I guess got gas food. I don't know what I was getting there. And as I was leaving and pulling out of the parking lot, there was a spider in my car. And I don't think I've ever seen I mean, this is like a big ass like spider that looked like it could like, you know, bite you and it would kill you. Excuse me, I shouldn't be saying that word, but bite you and something, it could like give you poison. So I started freaking out in the parking lot. I'm like trying to like swipe it and get it off. And like I was like paying way too much attention. I kept like starting and like having to put my brakes on because I was almost like rear-ending people and like, oh my God, like I don't know why I didn't just pull over and deal with the spider. But I'm trying to drive and do this at the same time. And I got on the highway and I'm still battling with this stupid spider instead of just pulling over and killing it. Like again, I shouldn't have said that word because YouTube. But I just kept going and I remember I was trying to grab it with like a napkin and the spider like got on my hand and I started looking at the spider while I'm driving and I was like freaking out and I like went somewhere for a split second. And when I came back into my consciousness in my body, my car was about to go onto the side of a semi truck. I grabbed the wheel. I don't even know where the napkin and the spider went. And I swerved out of, back into my lane so that I didn't like side end the semi. I was in a Mini Cooper Countryman, which isn't the smallest Mini Cooper, but it's still a small car. Um, and I think that was evidence of me switching timelines now. What timeline did I switch out of? Probably a lower one into a higher one, right? But I didn't notice any like differences or anything in the timeline, but I think I was just so freaked out because, it was like, oh my gosh, I could have like been gone, and um I think I made it to West Virginia that night, I think. And I remember in my sleep, I had this dream that there was a funeral. And it didn't look like my funeral. It wasn't like, oh, there's my family and it looks like my hometown. Nothing like that. It was like a funeral that was like in another place, probably like a memory from a past life or something like that. And I went into, it's hard to explain where you go into, but it's like when you're in that dream state, go into these chambers or these spaces. And there was a part of me that just was like, I could feel the grief, right? And when you feel that, it can be a part of you that has passed away in another timeline, another lifetime, whether it's past or parallel lifetime, right? When you go into that, it's a fractal of your soul that didn't make it somewhere, right? And so I felt that and I processed it. And then I started seeing all this stuff about my soul mission and why I came to Earth and karmic stuff. So it was like, it was a dream that was related to this, but it was about a lot of other stuff too. And I think it freaked me out to the point like that was the first time I had really like consciously realized that like, oh, there might be a version of me that doesn't exist. And it freaked me out. It scared me, right? And so I tried not to think about it too much after that. And I think it's just taken some time for me to process and like raise my vibration. That now I can talk about it and it's okay, right? And I think I've learned more about timelines and switching timelines and stuff. So I'm like, I'm okay with it. So if you feel scared or nervous about that kind of stuff, it's totally normal and it's okay to feel that way. I think the more healing you do and working on non-attachment and the more we switch timelines as a collective and then you as an individual as well, I think it gets easier to think about and to talk about. But so anyway, later on, I was doing more healing work on myself because the past 2 years, it feels like that's all I've done. It's just constantly healing my energy, healing myself, whether that's me doing it, with my guides or me working with therapists or other practitioners or like in different groups and programs. I mean, I've even like witchcraft. I've even done witchcraft to do some of this healing, right? Which ends up being a lot of the same of this like new age, healing stuff you in therapy session. There's a lot of similarities between these all, these modalities and things. And so I was healing myself and I had to go and get that soul fractal of me, right? That didn't make it through that car accident and pull it into the present moment to heal it, right? So I think it's interesting because when I got back from that trip, I definitely felt like some people in my life were in a higher vibration. Like they weren't as sad or upset or depressed as when I had left. And I've seen the changes in their behavior since then. So I do believe I skipped into a higher timeline. And part of me with that one has always wondered, like, maybe that was a timeline where, like, the earth was gonna, people were gonna bomb each other. I don't think you can say that word either. But make, like there's gonna be war, and that's what's gonna happen to Earth in that timeline. So it was just me getting out a little early, right? And there's infinite versions of us, and I'm actually gonna play after I tell my last story, I'm gonna play a video when I talk about kind of trying to explain the numbers of timelines. So the last story I'm going to tell, I don't think I've ever told it publicly. But this one is more of like collective timeline shifts. I think a lot of people experienced this, but I think I experienced it um in a very intense way. So this timeline switch happened not too long ago in March of 2026. So this past March, as this is being filmed in July of 2026. Um, Now this happened around the time where there was conflict between the US and Iran. So the US um sent over explosives, I think you can say that, to Iran, and there was a lot of talk about it on the news and the media. And normally, at that point, a few months ago, I by that point I've gotten pretty good about just kind of like tuning a lot of that stuff out and just being like, silly lizards or like silly people, like, okay, like, I'm not on that timeline. I don't really dip into fear around that, but I do want to know what's going on. I personally want to know what's going on. And so I will see the headlines, but I won't really sit there and like get worried about it or get absorbed in it, right? Which is like to me, which is really good because I used to do that and like, hey, like this is a good state to be in. But when that happened in March, I started getting really fearful. And I was like, this is abnormal for me. Like, even when I was younger, I've always kind of been like, when it comes to like global conflicts like that, I've just been kind of like, nothing bad is going to happen. Like it's going to get resolved. It's going to be fine. Right. But I started getting like really scared about like Iran retaliating, and it's like, to an abnormal amount. And I remember I was like going to like Target, again, Target, you can tell I love Target. And I was like buying groceries and all this stuff, and I was getting anxious like in the store. And so that night before I went to bed, I was getting so anxious. I was like, okay, like I've got to tap in to this, right? And I had been like watching videos about how if they were to retaliate, this is how they could do it, and I actually was living in a city that I think maybe would have been more one of the cities they would have been able to like do something, right? And so I sat there and I tapped into it and I started feeling these versions of me that were on the timelines where Iran had retaliated. I felt them coming to me, right? And what I was hearing is like regret and grief. And I started going to my relationships with all the different important people in my life. And I was saying, okay, that relationship feels good. It feels healed. Okay, this one feels okay. Okay, this one, I have regrets. I should have done this. And I had to feel the regrets of that timeline version of me, right? And also me too. But I had to feel those regrets and I had to process them. And I had to say, I'm so sorry. I should have done this. I should have done that. I wish I had done this, but I release it. I forgive myself. I let it go. I did the best. It's like you have to kind of walk through these emotions, right? Tied to different, mainly relationships in my life. So it's going to all my different family members and different people in my life and doing this. And what was weird and what got really trippy is that I had to do this with a family member that doesn't exist in this timeline. So the only reason I know about this family member existing, it's a niece that's not born into this timeline. So it's a child that my sibling did not have in this timeline, but they had in another timeline, right? Um, I was having to have these conversations with this niece, which the reason I know about them is because in my dreams I've gone to those timelines and experienced like this child was born in this timeline. That's my niece, right? And so I'm like having these conversations with different versions of this niece, but it's very general. It's almost more just like exchange of like feelings, almost like apology feeling or like acceptance feeling or peace feeling or releasing of like fear, guilt, anger, whatever it was. I don't remember exactly. But it's like I'm having to have this interactions with this person that I'm aware does exist in other timelines, but isn't a real person in this timeline, right? So it was trippy, it was weird, but I was like, I know this person does exist in other timelines, right? And so I was doing all of that, right? And then I was kind of noticing that like these other versions of me, right, that had passed away in these other timelines, they were either integrating into my consciousness, into this other higher timeline, or they were being processed into the afterlife, right? Because some of these fractals of my soul that were me in different timelines were okay, let's anchor ourselves to this higher timeline. Well, some of them were like, okay, we've done what we need to do, mission complete. Let's be processed on to the afterlife, right? Um, it really is interesting to show just how big our soul is, that it's like multiple fractals of the same person, right? But I was doing this, I finally felt calm and at peace. I went to sleep. And during my dreams, I was continuing to have the same conversations that I had had with important people in my life in this physical reality, but I said the thing I should have said, or I said a different answer, or I stood up for myself. I continued that through my sleep. So I was continuing reliving things and ultimately, I think, anchoring myself to a higher timeline through my sleep. So, I woke up, you know, the next day. I told some friends about it. One friend told me that around that time, last night when I had been kind of going through that experience, they had felt a tremendous amount of grief kind of pass through and they had just been sitting there, by themselves, I think like in nature and they had just processed this grief that they felt, which I was like, okay, that's interesting because it could have been grief from they also were feeling some of their versions of themselves from the other timelines close. I had one person say that their significant other had seen a version of them like coming towards them. I don't know if it was like in their sleep or whatever, but I was like, okay, again, like if another version of you is coming for integration, that also supports that these other timelines were collapsing, right? And these other versions of us were not in the physical anymore. And over the next couple days, news reports started to come out that that Iran had tried to activate sleeper cells in the US, right? Um, so it was like through mainstream media, this had been reported. Also there was videos that I think were real, right? They appeared real anyway, on different social media, domestic flights where the military came onto domestic flights and took people off because they were confiscated, right? Um, and so I was like, wow, I think those other timelines where there was retaliation in the physical, and it was just so weird because it's like I'm seeing these other timelines, they collapse, and it's like I was just walking around like everything's fine. Like everything's here. I'm still here and walking around and the city's fine and like everyone's life has gone on, and it's just like I don't even know what timeline I was on. Like was I on the higher timeline and I'm just feeling it all come through, or was I moving myself through the higher timeline? Like I don't know. Like, and that's one of those questions that's like we go into consciousness and it's really hard to like just say a definitive answer because the answer is probably like all of those things were happening. Um, but I wanted to share that story because the next morning I woke up and I had this heart. So this is like a permanent jewelry that stays here. I don't take it out. Like it doesn't have like the back that you pull in and out. It has the back you go to the piercer and you leave it in. And I had this heart that was an opal I had gotten a few years ago. So I had gotten it when I was a very different person, a different version of me, and as time goes on, we all change into different versions of ourselves and we heal and we raise our vibrations. Um, and when I woke up that morning, like that, the back to that heart was gone. I did find the little heart. It was like in my bed or something, and I couldn't find the back and put it back in. And I just immediately thought, this version of me, this timeline, does not have that heart. It has a different earring. So I went to the piercer that day, grabbed myself. I don't think y'all can see it. It's a little flower. Um, but if you're living in the third dimension and you're not conscious or thinking about this stuff, or you don't believe it's real, you would just be like, oh, my earring fell out. Got to get a new one. Okay, let me go get a new one. Okay, no big deal. You know, um, but looking at it from the perspective of like maybe the timeline version of me that is in this timeline where the sleeper cells were not activated is a higher version of me. And what that heart represented was kind of a hard time in my life. And she doesn't wear that anymore because she's healed and she's a higher vibration. So I had to physically catch the third dimensional version of me up and go buy a new earring piece, right? So it's not always going to be where you have two of these. Sometimes it's going to be like something that could just be discounted, right? As a like, oh, it's a coincidence. I just need to go buy new jewelry. Like sometimes it's just like you recognizing what's happening in the third dimensional as a result what was happening in the higher dimensions, right? Um, and sometimes you physically feel it, right? Instead of see it. So I just want to mention too that this last story was more of like collective shifts, right? Of like big collective events happening that are shifting different soul fragments out of timelines that no longer exist. And it's probably, the same way to say that like we are shifting into a higher timeline. Now, the car accident story, that felt more of a like me just like as an individual glitching out of a timeline, right? Like leaving a timeline. So there are difference. There's collective timelines and then there are individual timelines. And this next video I made and I posted on my Instagram is more about individual timelines. So I just want to play this video for you guys. So, the best way to explain how many timelines of our reality exist is to actually quote Mean Girls and say the limit does not exist because the number of timelines is infinite, and I don't truly believe that the human brain can really comprehend that number. And here's why. And so I've been studying this spiritual stuff for a while now, and what I've learned from many teachers is that whenever we make a decision, right, in our life, and it can be a super simple decision like, do I want to drink water or coffee when I wake up, right? There's a version of us that chooses water, and there's a version of us that chooses coffee. And that's a very small decision, right? So think about how many tiny decisions like that you make per day, right? So if you're making that many tiny decisions per day, you could be splitting into 1,000 different, timelines per week, and think about how long you've been alive, right? And so when you think about how many timelines that is, it's like, can I even really calculate that number? I mean, you could try and you probably could, but it'd be so big it wouldn't even look like a number. It'd look like a code or something like that. And when I viewed it in the Akashic Records, what I've seen is that there's this version of you, right? This version of you as a person that was born into this reality. And it's like this wave of particles is always shifting and moving, right? It's like there's so many timelines that you're just kind of like glitching like through them like a wave. And so it just looks like this thing that's just bigger and more infinite than we could possibly ever try to calculate or imagine, like with our human brains. So that's why when it comes to timelines, I like to say the limit doesn't exist, because I don't know if it does exist, right? Because we're going to keep making new timelines every day until our time and contract up as this person that we are, this human that we are on earth is up, right? And I think it's interesting because I'm just talking timelines of us, of this person, but your soul is also most likely incarnated into other bodies and other realities, right? Because we're just in one version of Earth. Like there's also many, maybe infinite versions of Earth too, that your soul could be someone completely different in. They could also be an alien in another reality. They could be an alien in this reality. They could also also be another human being in this reality, right? Our souls are so big that it is hard for the human brain to comprehend. And the more I've explored the Akashic records, the more I've learned that there's just some things we can't comprehend really as humans. So when it comes to understanding timelines and realities and worlds, sometimes you just have to quote, I believe it's Katie Heron, right? And just say, the limit does not exist. Okay, so that was a video. I hope you guys liked it. I don't know. I just think the limit does not exist is like the best way to describe the number of timelines because it's like such a big number and I don't think we can calculate it. Truly, we could calculate it at a point in time, but it's like because like it's something that's infinite and also like growing, I feel like the limit does not exist is the best way to kind of like say it, but also like kind of joke too. That is all I had for today. I just wanted to share my stories. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you enjoyed it. I do want to let you know that I have a Starseed Masterclass linked below as well as some freebies. Now the Starseed Masterclass, it's 11.11, so it's like $10. And it's really good because if you're wondering, you know, if you had galactic past lives or what you were doing, you know, prior to coming to Earth and being a human, it's a really good way to, first and foremost, just learn about all these other different types of extraterrestrials you may have had been in your past lives. Like you want to know, like, hey, was I in Star Wars? Was I in Star Trek? You know? But you also actually do a meditation where you get to connect with the past life version of yourself. And like when I did mine, I was like almost crying because it was like so joyful to do this meditation that I downloaded and I created, right? And to see this version of me is in the angelic realms, and she was like this pink centaur, and it was just so beautiful there, and I was surrounded by this beautiful soul family, and it felt like home, and so it just gave me so much joy, and so I really, you know, wanted to be able to share that joy with others. And it gave me a lot of hope that, you know, like I could. And so that's why I created the master class. It's 11.11, so it's basically $10. You know, I wanted to make it affordable for everyone and just something that you can, you know, in a really low cost way, work with me and get to learn more about your soul history, right? So that's linked below as well as some freebies as well. So if you're interested, click on those. And then right now, I normally do group work, but right now I don't have any like group or like school that I'm running events through. I'm going to be creating a new group before the end of this year. So if you're interested in that, just make sure you either subscribe here, you sign up for my email list, which you do by subscribing to a freebie below, or you follow me on Instagram because that's where I'll be announcing the new group and we'll be going really deep into stuff today, like we went into today. So if you're interested in that, yeah, definitely subscribe so we can stay in touch. But yeah, that's all I had for today. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Bye.